Hello and welcome to this very special interview. Today I'm joined by senior lawyer and public interest activist and social activist, Mr. Prashant Bhushan. Thank you so much, sir. He frankly does not need an introduction. He always is in the eyes of the controversies and news. So in recent times, Kunal Kamra also has been going through contempt of court proceedings. You also have faced contempt of court proceedings and you had to pay 1 rupee, but you did not apologize for what you stood for. Do you think it is time in Indian context for the contempt of court law to be reviewed? I mean, is it being misused?
Yes, in my view, it needs to be reviewed. And we have, in fact, filed a petition in the Karnataka High Court. That is Arun Shoti and Ram, Mr. Krishan Prasad, and I, challenging this one part of the contempt law that is scandalizing the court and lowering the authority of the court. This part of the definition of criminal contempt is seriously problematic because it allows judges to sit in their own cause and hold any criticism of the court or even any satire about the court to be contempt of court and punish people for criticizing the court or making some trenchant comments about the court or some satire about the court. This is a relic of our colonial past. This was brought in at a time when judges were regarded to be the agents of the king. And since the king could not be criticized, therefore the judges could not be criticized. And therefore this law was brought. And it has been abolished in most parts of the world, especially in UK. In America, it was never the case. There, only a clear and present danger to the administration of justice is criminal contempt. And that's the other part of the criminal contempt definition, that is interference with the administration of justice. There is no problem with that part of the contempt law. That can remain because certainly if you interfere with the administration of justice by way of not allowing court proceedings to go on, or by threatening a judge, or threatening a lawyer, or threatening a witness, or threatening a litigant, that if you go to court or if you depose against me, then I will do this or that to you. That is interference with the administration of justice. That should be prevented. That should be punishable. But mere criticism or what is called scandalizing the court or lowering the authority of the court, there is absolutely no justification for that in a democratic country, because in any democracy, people have a right to criticize and critique any institution, including the judiciary. So this part of the definition of criminal contempt must be reviewed and must go. We have challenged it as being unconstitutional and violating fundamental right of free speech. And let's hope that the High Court strikes it down.
So, in the past also, several comedians like Kunal Kamra and cartoonist Rachita Taneja, who have made some satire or scriptures about the Supreme Court or related matters, they have been facing charges of contempt of court proceedings. Do you think the jokes in this country is being taken too seriously now?
Yes, I think so. I think judges are even wanting to suppress even satire or some kind of jokes about them. It's not a question of being taken seriously. It's a question of getting offended by them. And many people get offended by jokes about them, but they have to learn to take it in their stride. And including judges, they have to.
Yeah, sorry to cut you. So will that be said to be abusing the power of contempt of court, or how do you see that?
Yes, in my view, it is abusing the power of contempt of court. And in my view, this is a jurisdiction where judges sit in their own cause, where judges are trying to exercise the power of contempt in order to prevent criticism of themselves. And that's always a very dangerous thing to do. And that is another reason why this part of the contempt law needs to go.
So before I ask you other related questions about the journalists being arrested in this country, let me ask you this question. Recently, comedian Munawar Farooqi was allegedly arrested. Now, of course, he has been released on bail for jokes that he did not even make. How do you see this whole situation?
Today, I mean, the BJP and their governments are trying to clamp down on anybody who criticizes the government, anybody who resists the actions of this government in trying to victimize Muslims and minorities. And therefore, they are using laws which are totally inapplicable, such as the law of sedition or Section 153, etc., to try and harass, prosecute, arrest people who are critical of the government or criticizing their laws, like the love jihad law which they have brought, or the anti-conversion law that they have brought, or people who, or even comedians who make some innocuous jokes, if they feel that they are um, jokes about Hindus or any what they perceive to be anything involving their religion. But in a democratic country, everybody has a right. It's not that these people were not trying to offend their religious feelings and so on. Even if there are some jokes, that's not intended to cause offense.
Same was the case with journalist Mandeep Punia, who was arrested for reporting from a single border on farmers' protest. He was arrested, and again he has now been released. This also happened on Republic Day when some other 6 journalists also who tweeted on farmers' death, and they were booked under sedition charges like Rajdeep Satire, Shashi Thakur, and other journalists. Is there an attempt to stifle freedom of speech and expression, not just by comedians, but by journalists also who are reporting on ground and writing and tweeting on social media platforms?
Yes, I mean, there is a very, very clear and very concerted attempt to stifle freedom of speech and in any kind of critical speech against the government. And that is clear from the manner in which they have registered an FIR against Greta Thunberg and the toolkit that she tweeted, etc. It's also clear from the manner in which trolls descend on people who are saying, why are we not talking about farmers' protests, which Rihanna said, or this Meena Harris, etc. So the BJP and their governments are clearly fascist in nature. They have been known, the RSS, which is the kind of mother of the BJP in a way, has been known to be fascist in character, has been always admiring of the Nazis and Hitler and their methods. So they certainly don't tolerate freedom of speech, etc. They don't tolerate any kind of democratic values whatsoever, or scientific temper, or even any civilized values, because they indulge in violence, they indulge in abuse, the worst kind of abuse, they indulge in rapes, rape threats, etc. They are totally uncivilized people who do not believe in any civilized values whatsoever. So this is unfortunately, these are the kind of people who have come to occupy power in this country.
So talking about sedition charges, as per an article by Article 14 website, there has been the report reveals, as per the report, that 65% of nearly 11,000 individuals in 816 sedition cases since 2010 were implicated after 2014 when Narendra Modi took office. The same report also says that 96% of sedition cases filed against 405 Indian Indians criticizing for, politicians and government over the last decade were registered after 2014. And there has been an increase of by 28% when compared to 2010, before Modi government came to power and the UPA too. Do you think sedition cases have increased and the law is being misused in this country?
Yes, yes, absolutely. In fact, way back in 1962, the Supreme Court had said that when the law of sedition was challenged, because this is a colonial law, pre-constitution law, when that was challenged as being violative of freedom of speech, the court said that if you interpret it literally, that is trying to engender disaffection against the government, that if this is going to be treated to be an offense, then it violates your fundamental right of speech in a democracy. So therefore they said either we will have to strike it down or we will have to read it down. So they said that it is only if you are trying to incite people to violence or to public disorder and thereby overthrow the government, that would be an offense of sedition. But merely inciting disaffection against the government cannot be sedition. But unfortunately, today, despite that Supreme Court saying that and they're repeating that thereafter, the various governments are still going ahead, especially BJP governments, are still going ahead and charging people with sedition merely because they have said something against the government or against the chief minister or the prime minister. So this is totally against the law and just a very crude attempt to stifle criticism of the government.
So, as you said, on farmers' protest, Greta Thunberg and Rihanna, they also tweeted and they have spoken about this. And then there's a trend started in India. Then celebrities also back here in India, in our country, started tweeting on this matter. There have been several talks between the farmers' representatives and the central government on resolving the whole issue. What do you think is stopping the government, or what do you think, where is the problem? Why the government has not been able to solve the farmers' protest issue so far?
No, it's become an ego problem for the government. The laws were, of course, brought to enable large corporations, including multinational corporations, from getting into agriculture, especially agriculture trading in a big way. They were not meant for the interest of the farmers. They were meant for the interest of the large corporates and agriculture trading companies. But when they saw the sort of scale of the farmers' protest, the government climbed down and then agreed to defer the laws for about 12 to 18 months. But there is no reason why they should not withdraw the laws and bring another law after 12 to 18 months after discussing the matter with all the stakeholders, particularly farmers, because these laws were passed without any transparency. There is a law of pre-legislative consultation, which requires the government to put the draft of the law in public domain for at least 30 days to enable people to comment on the proposed legislation. This was not done. Thereafter, normally such pieces of legislation are referred to parliamentary committees where they can be discussed with various stakeholders. That was not done. Thereafter, there is a proper discussion in Parliament which should be allowed to take place on such critical matters. That was also not allowed. And thereafter, there has to be a physical voting, even if one member of Parliament wants a physical vote. There has to be a physical vote. In the Raj Sabha, the government did not have a majority. Several MPs asked for a physical vote, yet a physical vote was not taken. And it was passed through a voice vote, which is totally illegal. There is no reason why the government should not withdraw the laws and thereafter bring a fresh law. They are just standing on prestige now.
Now the reports are also saying that the government is cutting water and power supply at Tikri and Singhu border and that the farmers are not getting proper water supply. So is there an attempt to kill the whole protest itself?
Yes, there is an attempt to, I think partly the response of the government is out of panic. But
Panic.
yes, it is out of panic because they feel that somebody also wrote an article in CNN IBN website saying that these farmers and their supporters are planning an Arab Spring type of movement to capture the government, etc., which is absurd. But it's also an attempt to box in the farmers to prevent supplies from reaching there. It's a kind of siege that they have laid. Internet, electricity, water, movement, everything is sought to be cut off. And it's also causing, I mean, quite apart from causing a great deal of hardship to the farmers, it's also causing a lot of hardship to the local people who are living around there. Because if their electricity, their supplies are cut off, they can't go to work, their children can't do online classes because of the internet shutdown, etc. It's criminal as what the government is doing, and that's what Rihanna had tweeted. She had tweeted an article in CNN about the internet shutdowns and said, "Why aren't we talking about this?" And even that is taken offense to. And then this whole army of trolls, and thereafter all these Bollywood and sports celebrities are made to tweet together, uh, dance to the tune of the BJP's IT cell and the government saying India together, India against propaganda, and so on.
So talking about internet shutdown and ban, as per report, India lost around $2.8 billion in 2020 due to shutdowns, as per reports. I mean, it's a huge number. Why do you think this has happened? I mean, why internet shutdown? What led? What were the reasons? Why did the government do this?
So government is doing it in order to prevent people from putting out information about what is going on. In Kashmir, the internet was shut down in order to prevent people from communicating to the outside world and people from communicating amongst each other. I mean, internet is today a very important tool for communication. And if you shut down the internet, people can't communicate. So you are essentially choking off their ability to communicate. And that was the whole purpose. And even the internet shutdown about the farmers' protests
Yeah.
around the farmers' protest sites is also in order to prevent the farmers from communicating to the outside world. This is what is happening.
Failure of digital India?
Yes, it's also a failure of digital. What failure? I mean, it makes a mockery of the claim of digital India because it's a deliberate shutdown.
So as per the reports, in 2020 edition of the Economist Intelligence Unit's annual Democracy Index, India,
Yes.
India has the global ranking has dipped by 2 ranks in the context of India. I mean, in 2019 it was 51, and in 2020 it has come down to 53 in the Democracy Index global ranking. How do you see this?
No, there is a continuous slide during this Modi government in all the rankings, that freedom of speech index, freedom of press index, the development index, the democracy index. And that's obvious because if you clamp down on the press, on freedom of speech, if you destroy various democratic institutions like the judiciary, the election commission, the human rights commissions, the Lokpal, etc., then obviously the democracy, India will fall on the democracy index. And that's what everybody is talking about globally now, that India is now sliding into a kind of dictatorship, though nominally we may still be able to have elections, etc. But all the essential elements which are necessary for real democracy, I mean, election is only one element of a democracy. The other elements are freedom of speech, proper regulatory institutions like a free judiciary, uh, free election commission, an independent human rights commissions and human rights bodies, etc. If none of those survive, free media, then obviously you can't call India to be a democracy. Election is only one index of a democracy.
What is the way forward then, sir? I mean, from here on.
So the way forward is for the people to rise against this. The farmers have risen against what the government is doing. And the rest of the people also need to rise against this, because ultimately, when democracy goes, everybody loses. And therefore, everybody should realize that this is a exceedingly important thing for everyone in this country, and they need to stand up against this, against the onslaught on democracy that we are seeing today.
So my last question is, in the context of farmers' protest, migrant crisis during the lockdown in the wake of coronavirus pandemic, the ongoing protests, and so many other issues, economics, how do you see the role of judiciary and the responsibility of the judiciary?
So, in a situation like this, the judiciary has a very, very important role to play, because the judiciary is the main bulwark created by the Constitution to protect democracy, to protect fundamental rights. And when you see this kind of assault on fundamental rights and democracy, it is the role of the judiciary to stand up against that onslaught. But unfortunately, we have seen that the judiciary has kind of collapsed in this country. Its independence has collapsed. And the last several years, especially since the Modi government came, we have seen the judiciary caving in by way of not allowing important cases like the challenge to the CAA or challenge to the abolition of Article 370 or the challenge to the electoral bonds. They are not being heard. Even other matters which are heard, such as the issues of migrant labor, or during the lockdown, or the issue of the Rafale deal, or the issue of the Birla Sahara deal, or the Ayodhya case, all those cases are being decided in the way in which the government wants them to be decided. And one of the things that has happened is that, unfortunately, we have had a succession of chief justices who have used their power as master of roster in a manner in which the government wants them to use it. That is, sending politically sensitive cases to convenient benches so that the cases are decided in the manner in which the government wants them to be decided. And this is what those 4 judges said in the press conference 3 years ago. This is unfortunate, very, very unfortunate and very alarming what has happened.
Thank you so much, sir, for your time. Thank you so much for talking to us at the Logical Indian. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.